What's your table's biggest ignored rule? Let us know in the comments below. Hey, don't you ignore us. We asked you a question. Encumbrance. For spell components, a spell focus will negate the need for all spell components which don't have a cost spelled out in the spell description or state that is consumed by the spell, which is pretty rare, and those few spells are usually pretty powerful, so it's good to keep a bit of a lid on them. Tracking ammunition. Ugh, so mundane and tedious for a fantasy game. I think being able to swap out spell selections willy-nilly is maybe a bit much, but I'm not mad at taking a mulligan now and again when you realize that speak with plants or whatever kinda sucks, and you regret your choices. Time to equip or change weapons. If the fighter wants to swap his two-handed axes for his greatsword, cool, that's free. I'm not going to make him miss a turn to make an impact just so he can swap weapons. The rule that potions are an action. I make them either a bonus action or an action so that drinking a potion doesn't eat up the player's entire turn. I have a quick quaff option where you get half effectiveness from healing potions for drinking them as a bonus action. You also get reduced effectiveness on other potions depending, like you might use a bonus action to drink a potion of fire breathing, but then you only get one round of it. The only issue I have with potions being a bonus action as a standard is that it makes cure wounds so much worse, and healing word only useful for bringing people up. This way I find it's a little more balanced. It's hard to say though. I have several house rules that were agreed upon by all that change the pace of combat a bit, so not sure how it would be as a standalone rule. In our games, we have a ruling that if you have the potions handy, like on your belt or a similar thing that has easy access, they can use a bonus action to consume it. But they have to mention when they put their potions on their belt and how many or what type when they do it. And there is a risk of them breaking in combat in some situations, like a massive critical hit made by an enemy, or if something else happens that would make sense for a bottle to break. It's worked for us for many years and makes for some strategic planning as well. I use a variant inventory encumbrance approach. Each of my players has a small 1x1 binder, a 26-page spellbook, and I use a card inventory system. It's basically a physical slot system. I have kids in my game that are notorious loot goblins, so I need to balance encumbrance as boring as fuck without letting my loot goblins be, well, you know, loot goblins. Cover bonuses. Well, maybe not ignored so much as forgotten about. Binary success. You can have critical successes and failures on skills. You can have big values and low values. If you roll 30 on the DC 15 knowledge check, I will give you additional info. I know that it's against the rules. I know that some abilities like Psi Bolstered Knack that can be only used on failure and not spent if you still fail, they interact terribly with that. But I don't care. Critical failures require not only to roll 1, but be really bad, like 0 on the total. If you are proficient with the check or at least have 10 in the ability, you are not affected. The players often like to show the failures of their characters in the thing that they are designed as weaknesses. The combat rules count strictly for the players who sorta optimize their turns and consider stuff like builds and the like. The combat rules are more flexible when a player is having terrible combat, not like about to die, but I just haven't hit anything in 2 sessions. Similarly, the player who gets overwhelmed by the rules easily and is also juggling a baby or whatever will assume they were hiding already, so sneak attack damage applies, or that they already had drawn their longbow, or that they can cast a spell as an action and as a bonus action, or whatever, and no one says anything. Sort of a hybrid rule of cool. The arcane focus spell component pouch item is the designers acknowledging that most players didn't want to bother with spell components, and this was an option to hand wave them without removing the jokes from the spell descriptions. Spellcasters are too good. People also removing limiting factors from them like vocal components, set spell lists, material components. I hope you give the marshals a similar break to even it out a bit. That said, using an action to use a healing potion is ignored in favor of bonus actions. Rage applies to thrown weapons, and you can use a bonus action to maintain it. Not exactly an ignored rule per se, but a slight change. Players won't get hit unless the attack roll exceeds their AC. So if their AC is 15, baddies will only hit from 16 or above. It makes them so happy every time it occurs because they keep forgetting about it, even though I made it very clear early on that I'm changing that bit, since they're the heroes and they deserve some plot armor. Rolling before you even announce what you're doing or why, especially when outside of combat. If you're doing something, the DM will ask you if you need to roll and what check is needed. You can always argue with them if you want to specify how you do something or to add nuance, but don't just default to yeeting the dice. Encumbrance, racial stats, and multi-class requirements. I get the reason for each of them, and I have played at tables with each of them, but I and my table prefer to not use these rules. Encumbrance, I think, is a very common one to avoid. It makes the game slower, and while it's great in a survival campaign, it becomes a slog in a power fantasy. Generally, we rule that you can carry it if it's reasonable for you to carry it. In a similar vein, we don't keep track of spellcasting components without a written cost or non-magical ammunition. It's assumed that your character is buying that outside of session time, and it's cheap enough that the gold cost really doesn't matter. Racial stats kind of make sense though, but also you could absolutely have a dexterous dwarf. It's also largely been done away with since, I think, Tasha's, so maybe this is less of an ignored rule and more of adapting to match newer content. Multi-class requirements do make a lot of sense from a balancing standpoint though. At a table where balance isn't the most important thing though, they often get in the way. If I'm playing a rogue and I want to take a couple levels of warlock for invocations, it feels bad to have to boost my charisma before I'm allowed to. At my table, you can multi-class into or out of any class regardless of stats. Yes, it makes characters stronger, but that just means I get to throw stronger monsters at the party. It depends on the player. Our druid struggled with spells. He no longer plays, but didn't ever count his spell slots, or one time he used heat metal at level 2. Our blood hunter uses hex. He never rolls for concentration. The same would go for the ranger as well. I don't always roll concentration myself as a paladin with good stats. I have +9 to it, so I only do it if I get hit hard. The barbarian and the ranger don't track ammunition with javelins and shots. I am the only player who looks at expensive components. Coincidentally, I'm the one who buys everything with personal gold. I forget things I meant to ask last session and normally have to ask them at the start of the next one. Oh, by the way, I forgot to ask to buy potions. Can we say I went in and bought some? Now, we do track encumbrance and rations. I know because our bag of holding was filled exclusively with hard liquor. The aforementioned blood hunter remembers how much is left and rolls con saves behind the scenes for it. Ammo economy, components economy, weight of currencies, time skips, how much you're carrying essentials like food, and the actual economy itself. We essentially removed some of the micromanagement. We're balancing things between common sense gameplay fun factors and also the fact that the DM can make shit up as we go anyway. Micromanaging inventory has often led to errors and a bit of time wasters in sitting down and doing some math and discussions, as all of us don't keep a good record on these things. So we kinda go by an honorable gentleman and ladies agreement. We don't bullshit the DM, and they don't bullshit us. So, when someone uses a gun or crossbow, we're doing shot counts. No weight. Kind of video game-like. Gold is weightless and stored in a bottomless pouch. Prices are balanced on how rich we are, so we're never too rich anyway. Prices can fluctuate drastically due to wizards and witches investing into crypto scrolls, and we love to gamble our riches away. Resources like food is simply measured as food for X amount of travel days, and when we're in towns, we just automatically restock for a fixed price and assume people got what they needed as long as it's not deemed rare materials. Encumbrance is only measured by things you have actively equipped, and you can carry like 1 or 2 swap weapons that we don't account for in weight. But if you're a loot goblin with 12 swords, obviously that gets counted. If anyone wants to craft things but hasn't gotten the materials, there are the Amazonian Primes tribes and their delivery services. Oh, I love this so much. We can all agree on time skips where we pay X amount of silver per day waiting. So we, again, never get too rich as convenience becomes rather expensive. I'm sure some tables make the micromanagement fun to a point where it can spawn entire quests or be essential for difficulty or world building, and we had that too, till they took too much time away from the main events. This was for our own good. Encumbrance, spell components, gold weight. We use a little common sense with these two, so we're not just loot goblins. Like one of the sessions, the rogue had to ask the fighter, who has a belt of giant strength, to carry their big-ass bag of gold back to town. We also use a few homebrew rules like how potions use a bonus action, swapping weapons is a free action once per turn, yada yada. We have 2 new players, one returned player since we used to play D&D when we were kids, and another experienced player. We've been playing for 2 years with this campaign, so I like to try and make it less annoying and make the game more enjoyable. There are rules as a group we all agreed on, so it's all fun and games. Rule of cool is one of our biggest things. Our players have no interest in playing any official games, so technically they've not developed bad habits for that sort of table. Death saving rolls, but only when a player isn't present for a session. We have some players who frequently miss games for health reasons. Someone else runs their character if there's combat or something within their skill wheelhouse, lockpicking, identifying objects, using an item they have, etc. And the DM did their death saves the few times it's come up. The first time the DM rolled a nat 1 death saving throw for the absent player's character, which already had one fail, they froze and looked immeasurably guilty. I suggested we just not do those if the player wasn't here, and say they're simply knocked out in the bushes. It made things more pleasant overall. Apparently, holding items. I watched Z Bashu's video on object interactions, and it all made sense to me. I've explained how it works on many a Reddit thread and helped one of my friends figure out the process of casting a spell while being a sword and shield hexblade warlock. It all feels totally natural, until the moment my group starts playing. The druid's holding a moon sickle and shield, wants to use his wand of magic missiles, so I say sure. The artificer has a shield, a +1 spell focus, and an arcane firearm, wants to drink a potion, I say sure. The sword and shield fighter wants to throw 2 hand axes, sure I say. The last case happened in a recent session. The fighter moved in to slash an ogre battering ram. The ogre had a very specific reaction action that let him shove the fighter out of range and remove the rest of his movement. So, the fighter had to compromise and throw weak hand axes instead of perform his regular attack. Telling him that he had to drop his sword and could only throw a single hand axe would have felt like kicking him when he was down. But if I'm not going to enforce that pretty egregious case of ignoring object interactions, how can I justify being strict with the casters? Worth noting that we're still at the levels where the fighter usually does way more in combat than the casters too. Well, I DM for kids, so we bend or ignore a lot of the rules most times. Generally, I only make them stick to rules based on what kind of arc we are on. We are moving into a dungeon crawl, so keeping track of spells and exhaustion points as well as not allowing long rests is part of this one. When we did a long trek, they had to remember rations and such. I try to make it so they learn all the different rules, but don't make it so they don't get bogged down with them. I allow any traveling NPC to be a sort of trinket seller who almost always has the spell components. But players have to remember to seek them out. They seem to enjoy having a shopping list that I am never pushing in their face, like a shop vendor. Hey everyone, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know in the comments below what's your table's biggest ignored rule. And of course, if you want to support the channel and ignore all conventional rules, make sure to join our membership program. You get early access to videos, and you get to keep our lights on this year. It's really fun. We love you all. Please be safe, happy, and healthy. Toodaloo for now.